when you're awake to the danger, it's hard to close your eyes to it ever again. So my instant come after the Beslan school massacre, and I watched as jihadists had took over a school, Chechnya, Russia, and they took over a school. So all the children are in the school, and then the parents have obviously found out. So the parents have come outside the school, the military are all there, and I can remember seeing it. I can still see it now. And as they started massacring the kids in the school, the parents are all dropping to their knees, screaming. There's nothing they can do as they're hearing their children be killed. And I remember watching it thinking, what is this? Because it wasn't one lone crazy individual. There was a whole gang of men. So many terrorist atrocities are all linked back to Luton. It all comes back to Luton. And the reason it comes back to Luton is because al-Mujahideen, probably pronouncing it wrong, which Omar Bakri, Abu Hamza, you know, Hook Hand, and some of the world's most famous jihadists, their organisation's head office was in my town. So growing up,
it had something to do with you praising the soldiers coming back from war, and they were against it, right? They said that they're fighting their brothers and sisters, and that's why we should impose war.
So that group, al-Mujahideen, had been active for decades in Luton, radicalising, and it was after the Beslan school massacre. Do you remember that? How old are you?
I'm 29.
Okay, so you're young. So the Beslan school massacre was a wake up. You know, we've all had the light bulb moment at some point. Something woke you up, something woke me up. When you're awake to the danger, it's hard to close your eyes to it ever again. So my instant come after the Beslan school massacre, and I watched as jihadists had took over a school, Chechnya, Russia, and they took over a school. So all the children are in the school, and then the parents have obviously found out. So the parents have come outside the school, the military are all there, and I can remember seeing it. I can still see it now. And as they started massacring the kids in the school, the parents are all dropping to their knees, screaming. There's nothing they can do as they're hearing their children be killed. And I remember watching it thinking, what is this? Because it wasn't one lone crazy individual. There was a whole gang of men. And for me, I thought, where does this evil, where does this come from? And I'm looking, and that's when I started going down the rabbit hole a little bit. And as I went down the rabbit hole, I found in my hometown of Luton, I found a video 2 weeks later in a chicken shop in town where these Muslim men from Luton, one of their names was called Saif al-Islam, which translates as Sword of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
He sat there giving an interview on YouTube saying that an attack at an English school would be justified. Like that. He was talking about the Chechen attack, the Beslan massacre. And I looked at it and thought, I'll be honest, as a young man, so I just thought, who the fuck is he, if I'm honest? And he's in my town. Who is he? And then I looked at who he was, found his group. This is when I found out who al-Mujahideen were. Looked and found their head office was in Biscuit Road. And I'll just speak very honestly here. I was at that time, a young football hooligan. And from my point of view, I thought, well, we're coming to find you. If I'm honest, you're not getting away with this. And then as I looked where their office was, I looked at the group, and I went down the next Saturday to observe them. And they had pace tables set up every week in our town centre outside Dominics. I never took any knowledge of them. I didn't care back until remember, this is before terrorist attacks in the UK. Yeah, so it's before 7/7.
Mm-hmm.
This was 2003, 2004. Yeah, so I've looked. And I've gone down and watched, and I've looked at the leaflets and listened to what they're saying. They were openly promoting jihad. They were openly calling for war against non-Muslims. And they were openly recruiting and sending people to fight against British forces. And I went, and there was a police officer there in the town. I said, what's going on here? How is this going on? And she said, it's freedom of speech. So I said, okay, see if it's freedom of speech next Saturday when we turn up. So then next week I went and I organised and I handed out leaflets, and I called it Ban the Luton Taliban. Now, I gave a presentation at Oxford University where I went back in and dug up, because when I've done these leaflets, it made front page of my local newspaper. Mm-hmm. And in the leaflets, my rhetoric has never changed. You can dig up the leaflet. In fact, I pull up the front page of my local paper where they published the leaflet. Yeah. In 2004. So when I give a presentation in 2015 at Oxford University, I went back through the archives of the newspaper in the library and I got the front cover. It's called Ban the Luton Taliban. And in that leaflet, I said, whites and blacks are being religiously and racially targeted in this town, and no one's stopping it. Yeah, our daughters and our sisters are being targeted with drugs. They're being hooked for paedophilic gangs. Now, this was 2004. That is now grooming. It's what people know as grooming. But I named the gang. There was a gang in Luton called the Gambinos. 100, 200 strong Pakistani mafia group.
Gambinos.
Yeah, I know, very original, you mugs. I mean, at least make your own names up. They use the names of the Italians. So that's their name. And I named them. I named what they're doing. I asked the police in the leaflet, if we know what they're doing, and we know which businesses are doing it. Because now everyone knows we're grooming. Certain businesses, taxi ranks, were all involved in it in every city. Yeah, but we knew that in Luton. So if we know that shop is grooming children and prostituting them and hooking them on heroin, and these taxi ranks are working, why aren't the police doing anything? So that's what the leaflet done. But the fallout for me at that age, at 24, I done it barefaced as Stephen Lennon. Yeah. So I done it barefaced. I stood up, and on that day they weren't there. So it worked, because I'd say probably 250 young English lads turned up. I'll be honest, to confront the jihadists in our town, and they didn't turn up. They're shithouses. They didn't turn up on that Saturday. But then I stood up and I read this, and then the fallout from that, which I very realised. I was targeted from that point on. My house was smashed up. The Pakistani gangs, all of them had a target on me. But at that time, I was young, and we were a group of football supporters who would, on a Saturday, have a large group of men. And for a few years there then, we clashed with the gangs. And it come to the point where if I wanted to go out on the town, I'd only go out if we'd need numbers. Because in all the clubs are all the gangs. In all the bars are all the gangs. They're in the town, and we were in the town. So for a few years there, we were clashing heavily.
And they saw you as the head of the organisation?
No, so there was no. They saw me at the young football. Luton's football hooligan group was called the Men in Gear. The MIGs.
EDL wasn't formed at the time.
EDL wasn't formed. This was the MIGs. So Men in Gear. I was probably a prominent figure in the youth of that at the time, because I was young. So yeah, and then you had the older lads, the older lads just. To explain it to people. So when I grew up, my uncles were founding members of the football hooligan scene. So I grew up listening to the stories and aspiring and listening to it in that background and thinking it was great. As I'm 42 now, yeah, looking back.
29, you look 29, 28.
Oh, thank you. But I'd look and think, it may sound like madness to people hearing about football violence. I guess it was part of a cultural scene for us, for me. And it was just, and some people understand, it's lots of young men who get together and they don't mind a punch up with each other. There's no weapons. There's fair game rules. No one's going to stab anyone. You're not going to see 20 men kicking the hell out of one man. It's not that. You'd shake hands on afterwards. But men who didn't mind a fight. And I guess growing up in Luton, there was high levels of violence. But looking now, I'm 42 and I'm a father of 3. Am I going to be running around fighting people over football? No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm a different man now. But that's just going back to explain where I was at that stage in my life. And at that stage in my life, I had a very good job and career. I was an aeronaut. Most football lads do. They're not scumbags, yeah? They're decent, hard-working men who just let off on a Saturday. But again, so that was at that point, and I faced a lot of opposition then from the Pakistani gangs. Now, by the time 2009 comes, I've got 7 properties. I'm working hard. I'm successful.
You had 7 properties before this whole thing started?
By the time
Your activism?
By the time I got to the EDF, before I started the English Defence League, I had 2 businesses. I had a plumbing business. We had 6 employees, turning over hundreds of thousands every year.
Wow.
And I had a sunbed shop in the town centre. And I had 7 properties. I was buying properties with my ex-wife. Yeah. So by this point, I've got to the point of success. My passion was making money. I'd got to the point, like everyone, where I could leave Luton, because that's what everyone wants to do. Yeah, and I moved out of Luton and I'd started a family, and then 2009, there was a soldiers' homecoming parade in the town.
That's the one I'm talking about.
This is what ignited. This is what gave birth to the EDL. This changed my life forever, because as I said, I don't know where my life would be now if this didn't happen. So 2009, soldiers' homecoming parade. And the same group, which I'd already had my eyes on for years, but by this point, I'd just getting on with my life. Yeah? I'd stopped, like we had those few years of clashes. It sort of got to that point. And then they attacked the soldiers. The soldiers were marching through the town. They were given the freedom of the town. Tuesday morning, I turned up with my cousin to pay respects. In this regiment, Scott Muntridge, who was from the estate I was originally, my mum and that are from, and my family are from, he died, and Michael Swain, who was only 19 or 18, lost his legs. And then hundreds of Muslims turned up and spat in their faces and and called them butchers of Basra, baby killers. And it wasn't the point that this group done that for me, because I know this group, I know their ideology, I know who they are. So people understand as well, you know, many of these men have gone and fought and died now for ISIS. Well, that may seem a million miles away to some people. I went to school with them. Yeah, I know them. So when the Stockholm bomber left Luton and blew himself up in Stockholm, yeah, he lived 2 doors up from my auntie. Yeah, so this may seem, when we talk about jihad and terrorism, yeah, we stand next to them in the bank. We have to share the public space with them because you've brought them all into our town. So this isn't a million miles away for us. Yeah? Every time our town's name is dragged through the mud and makes headlines, it's to do with these scumbags. Jihad, terrorism. 2009 comes, and I went down that day and I watched as I saw all the niqabs. Like, it's quite a sight when you see 30 or 40 women in niqabs together.
Where everything is covered, only the eyes are...
Everything only the eyes. But
yeah.
When I saw the group and I saw so many police, then I started spotting Saif al-Islam, all the jihadist groups. Remember, they weren't prescribed at this point, this group. Roger, I used to hang around with him as a kid. He went to jail for armed robbery. He come out, converted to Islam. He's now been in jail for ISIS. But I know him. I know all his family. Yeah? And I started seeing them all. And a mob of them.
Why did he convert to Islam?
Everyone converts to Islam in prison. Everyone. If you want safety, everyone converts. Islam.
And then you can't leave.
No, you can't leave. But and then when you come out of the prison system, the English-speaking mosques are the Wahhabist and Salafist mosques. So all the converts become radical anyway. So, but the prison system. Say for example, we'll get onto it. But I just come out of jail now 3 months ago for making a documentary. Insane. I got an 18-month prison sentence for sharing a factual film. Yeah, but I got 18 months in that jail. Remember, 6% of the UK is Muslim.
How can people find the film? What should they...
I'm not allowed to tell you because I'll go straight back to jail.
Don't tell me.
Yeah. So, but in that prison, 40% of the prison I was in is Muslim. 6% of the UK is Muslim. 40% of that prison. All the maximum security dispersal prisons are 50% Islamic. Our prisons are ISIS training camps now. That's all. They're just jihadist centres, and they're radicalising and recruiting. In America, wake the fuck up, because they're doing the same there. They're converting the blacks. They're taking historical grievances and they're turning it all. Yeah, and the Nation of Islam, all these different groups, and they're in the prison system, and we're not stopping them, and neither are you, because I've been looking at the conversion rates even in America. It's insane what's happening. They're building an army. That's what's happening in the UK. They're building an army of radicalised, hardened, toughened men. Yeah, but so this happened in Luton. But when this happened in Luton, I watched as the police. I'm watching, and I see all the jihadists, and I see them open my town hall, like our government building, and they walk them through. The police escorted them through the town hall. I'm thinking, what's going on here? And then I hear all the commotion, and at the back of the town hall, as the soldiers marched past, so the police took the jihadists through our government building to the front of where the soldiers are marching to spit in their faces and attack them. And that is the level of where we were at. So when I say they let them rape kids, which again we'll get on to, they had never heard the word no.